The silver sedan rolled to a stop at the intersection, and Officer Daniel Thompson's eyes narrowed at what he saw through the cracked window. A man who looked like he hadn't slept indoors in months. A beard tangled with road dust. Eyes that had seen things most people spend their lives trying to avoid. Thompson's hand drifted toward his radio. This was, by every visual cue he'd been trained to read, a problem waiting to happen. He had no idea he was about to be humbled in the middle of a public street. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. Thompson stepped out of his cruiser slowly, the lights still spinning blue and red against the morning trees. 6 years on the force had taught him patterns. Old car, no plates, renewal sticker visible. A driver who looked like the street had chewed him up and spit him out somewhere behind a strip mall. He'd pulled over hundreds of cars like this. Most of them ended in a warning. Some of them didn't end well at all. He didn't know yet which kind of morning this would be. License and registration, Thompson said, crouching by the window, voice flat with procedure. The man inside didn't move fast. His hands shook faintly as he reached toward the glove compartment, and for a second, just a second, Thompson's whole body tensed. That flinch. The officer would think about it for days afterward, turning it over like a stone in his pocket, ashamed of how quickly his mind had gone where it went. But the man wasn't reaching for a weapon. He pulled out a small leather wallet, worn soft at the corners, the kind of object that had clearly been carried through years it shouldn't have survived. And beside it, pinched gently between two trembling fingers, came something else. Something small. Something purple. A medal. Thompson's breath caught somewhere behind his ribs. He recognized the ribbon before his mind even processed the shape of it. The deep violet fabric, the profile stamped in gold at its center. A purple heart. Not a replica. Not a costume piece bought at a flea market. The real weight of it sat in the man's palm like it belonged there. Like it had been there through hospital beds and silence, and years nobody had bothered to ask about. "Sir," Thompson said, and his voice had changed completely. "Where did you get that?" The man's eyes lifted, and there was something ancient in them. Not anger, not fear, just tiredness. The particular exhaustion of a person who has explained himself too many times to too many people who stopped listening halfway through. "It's mine," he said quietly. "Earned it the hard way." He thought the officer would ask him to step out of the car. He was wrong. Thompson reached for the second item, now sliding free from the wallet. A worn certificate, edges soft from years of folding and unfolding. Department of Defense. Certificate of release or discharge from active duty. The paper had survived rain, sun, and the particular violence of being forgotten by a system that once swore it never would. A small crowd had begun to gather on the sidewalk, the way crowds do at intersections, drawn first by curiosity, then held by something heavier. A woman walking her dog slowed her steps. Two teenagers paused mid-conversation. Nobody spoke. There was only the low murmur of the police radio and the rustle of leaves overhead, and underneath all of it, a stillness that felt like the whole street was holding its breath. Thompson studied the name on the certificate, studied the man's face, studied the years stacked between the photo he imagined once existed and the man sitting in front of him now. "You served," Thompson said. It wasn't a question. 3 tours, the man answered. Came home different. Country didn't know what to do with different. Neither did I. And there it was, the moment that splits a story in two. Thompson could have written the ticket. He could have called it in, checked the registration, moved on with his shift like 1,000 officers before him had moved on from 1,000 men exactly like this one. Procedure didn't require kindness. Procedure never does. But procedure isn't the same thing as right. Thompson's jaw tightened. He thought about every assumption he'd made in the 4 seconds before he stepped out of his cruiser. The silent verdict he'd handed down based on a beard and a tired car and a man's posture in a driver's seat. He thought about how easy it had been to be wrong, and how close he'd come to never finding out. He didn't call it in. Instead, Thompson straightened up, removed his sunglasses, and extended his hand through the open window, not for documents, but to shake. The crowd on the sidewalk seemed to lean forward as one. Somewhere behind him, his partner had stepped out of the cruiser, and even she had gone quiet. "Thank you for your service," Thompson said. "I'm sorry it took a medal for me to ask the right questions." The man's weathered face cracked, not into a smile, not yet, but into something that had been braced for disappointment and found none. His shoulders, held tight for what might have been years, eased downward by an inch. A soft ripple of applause rose from the sidewalk. Not loud, not performative, just the quiet, human sound of people who had witnessed something true. Because dignity doesn't disappear when a man loses his home. It waits, folded carefully in a worn leather wallet, for someone willing to look close enough to see it. The lights on Thompson's cruiser kept spinning, blue and red against the morning trees, no longer marking a stop, but a beginning. If this story moved you, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because every person deserves to be seen for who they really are, not just who they appear to be.